Girls on the Move in the context of Central America and Venezuela. Welcome to everyone. As you know, immigration has affected the lives of millions of people all around the world, and especially the lives of those in Latin America and the Caribbean. And what we ask ourselves today is how is immigration and migration affecting girls, especially girls? For this reason, we will open up this event and we will ask for to hear our welcome from the Regional Director of Central America and Latin America, Victoria Ward. Good morning and welcome to all of our distinguished panelists, representatives of different governments and organizations, civil societies, and international agencies. Especially welcome to the girls, boys, and young people that are here with us today. It is truly a pleasure to launch these studies about girls on the move in the context of the commemoration of the Day of the Girl in October, and in this way, fight for gender equality. These studies make up part of a global initiative with the goal of developing recommendations for the creation of public strategies and public policies based on the voices of children. These studies include interviews with protection system operators, civil society participants, and others, but it is primarily based on the testimonies of girls and young people on the move in the region. Of the 80 million displaced persons that are estimated to exist in the world, 40% of them are girls and young women. They face a higher risk of violence, including sexual violence, undesired pregnancy, and forced work. These risks continue when they reach their destination, and their economic needs limit their opportunities for education and development. Quarantine and economic delays and problems caused by COVID-19 have increased the vulnerability of girls and young women on the move. In studies of migrant populations that we have done throughout the world and in Colombia and Venezuela, it has been found that the difficult circumstances of the girls and women that you're going to hear from today have become significantly worse with COVID-19. The estimates from our new Global Girlhood Report indicate that there will be 180 million additional pregnancies this year in the region because of COVID-19, and approximately 80,000 child marriages, adding to the high numbers that we already had. Sorry, that was 180,000 undesired pregnancies. Girls are affected by this because of their vulnerability. As an international organization and also as states, we must respond in an agile way that transforms and listens to the girls affected by the situation. Save the Children executes or develops several different projects where we prioritize the active participation and the voices of girls, boys, and young people. In the context of Venezuela, Colombia, and Central America, country offices include programs with dozens of associates, and working with civil societies have developed these programs. One of the initiatives done in the framework of the competition, uh, Fight for Your Rights, together with civil societies and the organization Young People for Their Rights, this competition brought us to Raise Your Voice for Migrant Girls. Save the Children is seeing the difference that happens when there is a gender focus in mobility. It's focused on lessons learned and best practices, and it's focused on the testimony of young women and girls on the move. Given the significant challenges that we face to ensure that every girl and young woman on the move can have an effective response to her needs, today we have seen that it is more necessary than ever to continue reflecting on the findings of these studies and to seek together to ensure that their needs are taken care of. Thank you so much, Victoria, the Regional Director of Save the Children for Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you for these warm words of welcome. To get started, we are talking today about girls on the move in the region. And it is not working for girls, but working with girls. And for that reason, I have the honor of giving the floor to Jaibelin, 14 years old, a Venezuelan girl living in Colombia, who is here with us today. And we would like to hear her words of reflection. Jaibelin?
Amalia, Anas Guatemala, Tanulia Jaibelin Barroso, Guayuta ya Ipuana, Quepilla Azteca, Yaya, Asentamiento Torre La Majayura. Hola, muy buenos días.
Hello and good morning. My name is Jaibelin Guaguana.
Mi casa es Ipuana, yo soy de allá de Torre La Majayura.
I am from Torre La Mayure. I think, Javelin, we have lost your voice here. This is something that can happen sometimes with technology. Are we hearing you clearly? Javelin, I think your microphone? Yes, she's not saying anything. Okay, so we appreciate very much your words of welcome. Without a doubt, it is fundamental to have your presence and your participation here. Thank you for being here with us today. It's very good to have all of us here, not just adults, but young women and girls participating with us. It's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you. So now we will go to some central points. We want to start with a presentation of the primary findings and recommendations from the studies for the Central American and Venezuelan contexts. For this, we will have the participation of two people that have been involved in the process. Erica Marcos, Gender Advisor of the Civil Society Support Program from Save the Children, Latin America and the Caribbean, and also Sandra Johansson, Gender Advisor from Save the Children, Sweden. Welcome to both, and here we pass the floor to you so that you can share recommendations that have been found in this study. Thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. First of all, I want to say it is a real pleasure to be with you here, to be able to share some of the findings from this series of investigations and research or studies about children in movement and girls in movement. We want to share a little bit about this initiative and how it started. It is a global series of studies that puts voices and experiences of girls on the move at the center. It started with a very simple question, which was, where are these girls? We knew that girls on the move made up a significant part and a growing part of migratory flows. We also knew that girls on the move were especially exposed to vulnerabilities because of their gender age, and migratory status. But we found that girls on the move were practically absent from studies. There wasn't enough information about them. Studies about children on the move often lack a focus on gender, and studies on women migrants often do not include children. This means that girls on the move are often left on the margin. There are serious consequences for girls on the move because often programs are not capable of responding to their needs, their specific needs, or the violations of their rights. So, this series of studies was born as a response to this gap and seeks to improve the efficiency of programs for girls on the move. In terms of methodology, studies have been done on 3 continents and 4 different migration contexts: the south of Africa, the Balkans, and Latin America, where 2 studies have been published. Each study has specific evidence that can help us to close this gap in the current literature and that it can help us to deal with vulnerabilities and lack of gender focus in programs. They are qualitative studies, and as we have said, the truth is found in the voice of these girls. They are the ones that can tell us the best about their reality. For that reason, in every context, there is a participative context for girls in mobility and an exhaustive review of literature. In every context, we have concluded a participative research or investigation of programs that are currently active, and we have worked closely with teams that work with girls on the move. The idea of an active investigation, active research, is that these studies have a direct impact on how we work as Save the Children with girls. We talked to 140 girls on the move, many of them in Central America. In Latin America, we have also talked with more than 30 different key actors, as we mentioned. Aside from individual reports, there are 4 different reports, but there is also a global review or a global summary. And I would like to highlight 4 main findings from this group of studies. You're going to see that some of these findings are very directly related to what we have seen in the Latin America region. First of all, we have been able to confirm that girls on the move are left at the margins of studies, programs, and political policies. In this sense, it is important to have multiple focuses and not a segmented focus. Seeing how gender, age, and migratory status interact in the experiences of the girls instead of looking at those as separate points. When we work with girls on the move, it is fundamental to include an analysis of gender. Second, we have also been able to see that girls on the move, just as their experiences are diverse, they themselves are diverse. Because of that, a unique solution for all contexts or for all girls does not exist. If we want interventions to be effective, we must keep in mind that diversity and we must adapt our programs accordingly. Thirdly, we have been able to see that girls on the move are not victims or overcomers. Something that it shows us very clearly is that the risks and the violations of rights certainly exist together with capacity to act, self-empowerment, and opportunities. This really shows the way that we can understand their experiences, and it gives depths to way that we can promote their rights, not just looking at their risks, but also strengthening their abilities and capacities. In all contexts, we have been able to see that girls on the move use many different strategies to protect themselves and to face challenges. And sometimes the results of these strategies are mixed. Sometimes they can cause higher levels of protection, but sometimes they bring about additional risks. Despite this, we can strengthen the strategies that do work. For example, girls creating networks to support each other. With these 4 points that we have taken from the joint of all of these studies, we want to focus a little bit more on Latin America. And with this, I will pass the floor to Erica Marcos. Thank you so much, Sandra. I will get started, and as you can see in the regional context, we did 2 independent studies because of the different migratory contexts that we see in the region, and each context is different. Now, though, we're going to talk about the main findings that we have seen because there are similarities, even though they are very different contexts. And we will offer some concrete examples when is necessary. Our goal in these studies and in this presentation is to give voice to the girls, and so we will be sharing some specific testimonies. These are qualitative studies. They do not intend to give a complete view of the situation. And in the region, there were conversations with girls and young women, civil societies, public organizations, and people who work in the field. In the Central American case, we spoke with girls that were in transit in Mexico in shelters. All of the girls we spoke with were from Central America, and there were girls who were accompanied and unaccompanied. In the Venezuelan context, we spoke with girls in Guayajira in Colombia. Most of them were Waidu, of the ethnicity Waidu, like Jaibelin, who is here with us today. And many of them were taking care of younger children. The question is what things were like before COVID-19, but we have also seen that COVID-19 has highlighted the gaps that existed before as well as widening them. So we must consider how we can adapt our interventions to achieve better equality and create a transformative gender approach. All of us are familiar with the fundamental causes for the flows, the migratory flows that we see in the region. So we're not going to spend too much time on this, although certainly each context is a little bit different. We do want to highlight some similarities, though, that we have found in these girls on the move. This profile we created with an exhaustive biographic review, working in the communities, both in transit and in the destination countries, and talking to many different girls. And we want to highlight 3 key points. One is that in the region, there are very diverse groups of girls coming from different countries, of different ages, different races, ethnicities, and different identities that affect the way that the girls move. We see that girls of all ages are traveling, indigenous girls, Latin American girls, African and Haitian girls, LGBTQ girls, disabled girls, pregnant girls, orphaned girls, and girls who do not speak Spanish, and all of them face different challenges. As well, we can see that there are more and more vulnerable migrants every day. There are more and more people with compromised socioeconomic situations, and many times they find along their trajectory violence, whether against the migrant, their families, or because of the environment. Especially with girls and young women, we have found many testimonies about pregnancy or sexual violence as a cause of the exit from their country, especially in the Central American context. This risk is identified in with the Venezuelan girls that were spoken as a danger throughout their migratory process. And we want to highlight that clandestine border crossings have become highly risky. As migratory flows have grown and regular migratory options have closed, clandestine border crossings have become more and more dangerous, especially for girls and unaccompanied girls. In COVID-19, this has become even more serious and more dangerous. So we're going to present quickly some of the motivations, some of the findings about motivations for migratory changes that girls have gone through. In terms of motivations for migration from the communities expressed by girls, we find similar causes in both contexts, even though we do find family reunification more commonly in the Central American context than in the Venezuelan context. These situations, vulnerabilities, and risks are found throughout the migratory process, in transit, and even at their destination. With the COVID-19 situation, it is absolutely even more challenging to overcome these structural challenges. Within the motivations that we have found in the study for migration, we can see a few different motivations, but I want to highlight three. One is a lack of food, especially mentioned by Venezuelan girls. They also mention a lack of services, an inappropriate home space. And in Central America, there is often the mention of economic support needed from their nuclear family. In the Venezuelan context, girls mention obstacles to education, an inability to attend to school regularly, or responsibilities for taking care of their families that the girls mention, and this prevents them from attending school. Pregnancy was also mentioned in talking with the girls, especially as a reason for dropping out of school. In both contexts, we see frequently that girls mention a high level of awareness about risks of violence, especially sexual violence, which saturates every aspect of their lives. In the Venezuelan context, the girls mentioned that they did feel safe at home, but out in the streets, in the communities, in public spaces, they did not feel safe. They mentioned specifically rape, sexual violence, and kidnapping. In the Central America context, this is present, and through the context, we can hear that there are connections between poverty, violence, and family reunification. Now let's look at the findings in transit. As we mentioned, in several situations, girls mentioned that they are exposed to the same risks in all different phases. So they face risks that are constantly with them, but in transit, they take on new challenges. Physical strength is required in order to walk for long amounts of time or even cross rivers. With COVID-19, mobility restrictions have increased these risks. Contagion risks as they travel in groups the xenophobia of people who are new to the community who might be carrying the virus, and these clandestine border crossings, which are more and more dangerous every day. We want to highlight a few key findings here. First of all, girls mention in both contexts anxiety during the travel, throughout travel, especially at night, fear of being robbed, and criminal groups, which is very connected to problems like insomnia. We see that violence is a constant threat for girls in on the move, but especially in transit. And girls mention that they are more afraid of violence at this time. Girls mention fear of this, and we see this all through the literature. Girls, we see the exchange of sex for basic needs, often child marriage used as a tool to achieve legalization or other needs, and then gender violence and other sexual based violence in their environments. In the Central American context, another important point is that as the girls mentioned that at the beginning they were unaware of the magnitude of the travel. And one technique is to gather information for a second attempt. Another very important finding is that girls are able to develop friendships and relationships between each other. We have a testimony here on the screen about how some of the girls were able to connect with each other. So we have talked about how the borders are especially dangerous and girls use different protection strategies while in transit. They look for travel companions, even though this can sometimes be counterproductive. They might travel with men, other groups where there are men. They identify contracting coyotes as a protection option, although this can certainly have other risks. There might be fights with other coyotes, or the coyotes might be connected with criminal groups. And the risk of sexual violence, which they know may happen, has caused many girls to choose to take contraceptives during their travel. With that, we will move on to the findings for girls who have arrived at their destination. We want to mention that in the study, we did not ask about the Central American girls about their destination. They were in transit and they were asked about that process. So these findings are only for the Venezuelan context. They said that they are still facing poverty. They're unsatisfied with their situation. They find similar violence and similar situations of violence in Colombia, as well as xenophobia and discrimination, lack of access to education and health in different contexts, especially in the temporary shelters. Girls also informed that they did find an improvement in their basic needs being met and that they had better access to food. Access to public services is still a challenge, especially now. We want to highlight three findings from these studies about the destination, girls in their destination. They mention that for them, it is very important to have friendly spaces. It helps them to develop friendships and feel more comfortable, especially for girls coming from very dangerous spaces in Venezuela. They find friendly and safe spaces that they value
Como comentamos a lo largo de todas las
deeply.
etapas
As we
migratorias,
mentioned,
la violencia
throughout
sigue siendo
every
presente en el
step
discurso de las
of
niñas y
the
niñas,
migration,
violencia
violence
que
is still
impone
mentioned.
directamente que sigue
And they
dejando
themselves
expuestas a
say
violencia, incluida
that
la
they
violencia sexual.
continue experiencing
Dentro de
violence
los
and sexual
asentamientos
violence
temporales, las niñas
in
se
the
sienten especialmente
temporary
vulnerables. Por
shelters
ejemplo,
and
las noches
camps.
para
They
los
still feel very
campamentos, muchas
vulnerable.
de ellas
Many of
van
them say that they
equipadas
will not
con bolsas
use
dentro del
the
vecindario
restroom
para no
at
ser vistos
night.
y
Rather, they will
no
use
ser vistas.
bags in their
Y
own
esta amenaza de
bedrooms so that
violencia
they do not have
siempre
to leave at
presente
night.
conlleva una importante restricción de su
And
libertad de
this
movimiento y del acceso al
violence
espacio público.
prevents
Y
them
esta
from
violencia no
having
solo
total
es en el
mobility.
espacio público, como hablábamos
Violence is
antes,
not
sino
just in
también en el
public spaces, as
privado,
we mentioned
como
before,
puede
but also
destacar
in
en
private
el
spaces,
testimonio que se
as
está
you can
proyectando.
see in the testimony that we
Por
have
último,
projected here on the
resaltar que los
screen.
patrones en torno al género y a la edad surgen
What we do see
dentro
is
de
that
las
there are
responsabilidades
patterns
de las
about
niñas
gender
en
in
cuanto al
terms
cuidado de sus
of
hermanos
the
y menores.
responsibilities
Varias
for girls
informan que cuidan a sus
that
hermanos
girls
en el
have.
caso de una madre
Many mention that they
adolescente
need to take care
asexual
of their children,
y
and
esto
in the case of an adolescent
restringe
mother, their own child.
gravemente y fuertemente su
This
participación en otros
restricts
espacios. El
significantly
trabajo
their
infantil también
participation
es
in
común
other
y
spaces like
señala la
education.
necesidad de
Child
refugiarse
labor
como
is also
oportunidades de generación
very
de
common,
ingresos
and it is
y
highlighted as an
prácticamente
opportunity
restringen
to
el acceso a programas
create
y coartan
income,
exageradamente su
but this
participación
does
y comprometen sus
significantly
actividades.
cut their
En la
participation in
actual situación de
education.
COVID, las
With the
limitaciones
current
para el
situation of
ejercicio de
COVID
una
19,
participación protagónica y activa
limitations for
de las niñas
to be able to take a
hacen que se quede muy
protagonistic
comprometido,
uh,
¿no? Son desafíos mucho
position
más
in
grandes
their
que
own
los que
lives,
tienen
they're
los
facing
contextos donde lo
significant
virtual no es
challenges
lo
with COVID
habitual.
19.
Igualmente, el acceso a la educación y a la
Also,
salud
access to
es un
education and
desafío
to health is
en esta situación.
a challenge at this time.
Entonces pasamos a las principales
So
recomendaciones.
we
Ya
shall now
Sandra
speak about the
apuntaba
main
algunas, pero podemos
recommendations. Sandra
resumir o
mentioned
ampliar
a
algunas
few,
para el contexto
but we're going
latinoamericano.
to add a few specific ones for the
Y
Latin
bueno,
American
la
context.
recomendación principal es que se invierta
And the
y que se
main
invierta a
recommendation
favor de
is
las
to
niñas,
invest.
prestando
Invest
especialmente
in
atención a las
girls,
adolescentes.
paying attention, special
Invertir
attention to
no
young women,
solo
and
desde un
invest
enfoque económico,
not
sino desde
only
todo el sentido de
economically,
la palabra.
but in a very
Invertir
broad
en la
sense.
adaptación programática, invertir en
Invest
nuestros
in
esfuerzos de
programmatic
incidencia, invertir en nuestro programa de
adapting programs for
entendimiento y
girls,
desarrollar una escucha activa
invest
hacia las niñas
so that we
inmovilizadas.
can hear
En la
actively what
situación
girls are
actual de
saying
COVID,
and
la
invest
adaptación
in
programática,
advocacy.
como hablamos, tiene
With
sus
COVID
limitaciones y
19,
sus desafíos, pero
programs
también
have
conocemos que
challenges,
se están
but we can
desarrollando
also
iniciativas
see
muy
that we are
interesantes para la
developing
atención de
initiatives that
niñas
are
en
very
movilidad, sobre todo en
interesting
destino,
to
incluso a través de
attend
las etapas
to girls on the
escolares.
move, including
En
in
este
their
sentido,
destinations.
recomienda en el plano
This
programático que
study
se
recommends
identifiquen de
that
forma
programs
prioritaria las
identify as a
formas
priority
inmediatas de
the
reducir el daño
immediate
inminente a las
ways to
niñas y
recognize
abordar las
damage to
necesidades básicas
girls
de seguridad.
and to help them
Pero
meet their
también
basic
recomienda que
daily
se promuevan
needs.
redes de
But it
apoyo, se
also
sensibilice
recommends
sobre los
that we
riesgos
support
específicos para
them,
el
that
tránsito,
we create
la
awareness
cooperación
about
permanente en
risks in
compartir
transit,
información sobre el
that
viaje
we
antes de
help
iniciarlo
them to have
o
more
proporcionar
information
espacios seguros
about
bajo
travel
enfoques de
before they
apoyo
begin to
psicosocial.
travel, and that we create
En las comunidades de
psychosocial
origen,
support for them.
por
In
ejemplo,
the
mejorar
origin
el apoyo a las
communities,
personas
for
migradoras,
example,
por ejemplo, a
improving
través de
the
programas transformadores
situation
de
of
género
those
sobre
who will
educación
migrate,
inclusiva, o
social
fortalecer la prevención
development
de servicios de
situations,
salud
and
sexual y reproductiva
strengthening
amigables a
the
las niñas, sobre todo
uh,
en destino,
health
considerando la
benefits that are
prevención y la
provided to
respuesta a
children,
la violencia
especially
de género
um,
como un pilar
for
fundamental en la
girls, as a
preservación dirigida a la
fundamental
niñez en
pillar
movilidad.
to strengthen
Implantar
girls on
servicios
the
de
move,
guardería y cuidado para los niños más
developing
pequeños
services
hace
for
que
the
podamos
youngest
promover
girls
también más la
so that we can
participación de las niñas
promote
en
their
espacios colectivos y
participation
seguros.
in
Y
collective,
también el
safe
estudio recomienda,
spaces.
obviamente,
And the study
fomentar
also
las asociaciones
recommends
dentro de las redes de
to
la sociedad civil para la
develop
gestión de
spaces
estos
for girls
casos más
to
vulnerables.
speak
Pero también
and to
tenemos que
protect
invertir desde un plano de
their
incidencia,
the
¿no?
most vulnerable people
Promoviendo
in
el
our
fortalecimiento
communities,
de los sistemas de protección, de la mejora de los
strengthening
servicios estatales a su acceso, sobre todo
protection
ahora, los de
systems
acceso a la
and
educación y la
networks,
salud
and
son uno de
creating
los más
access for
comprometidos.
education and health
También
for
incidir,
girls,
por
which is
ejemplo, en la
currently
revisión
highly
de políticas
compromised.
específicas que afectan a
In
las niñas
reviewing
en
specific
movilidad, sobre todo
policies
en
that affect
materia de
girls on the move,
detección, en separación
especially
familiar,
in terms
policía
of
fronteriza y asilo.
mm,
Pero
border
sobre todo,
police,
invertir en la
family
escucha y
separation,
aprender sobre
etc.
las
We
niñas y
must invest in
adolescentes.
advocacy
Por
for them.
ejemplo,
But more than
invirtiendo en
anything
procesos
else,
participativos a lo
listening
largo
is
de todo el
important.
ciclo de proyectos
Developing
bajo diferentes
participatory
metodologías.
activities
Las niñas
in
en
through
movilidad
different
proporcionan información en
uh,
tiempo real que
modalities.
explican cómo
girls can offer us real-time information about what the alternatives are and what the options are for the challenges that they are facing.
Muchas
Thank
gracias,
you.
Erika. Muchas gracias, Sandra, por compartirnos
Thank you,
sus
Erica. Thank
habilidades
you,
en
Sandra,
estudio y
for sharing this
profundizar en
general
desarrollar
view about the
nuestro
studies
camino
and then
como
going
región
much deeper
América Latina y
into
el
what
Caribe.
these studies have
Sin
found in
duda,
Latin
los
America
elementos
and
que
the
se
Caribbean.
presentan nos
Without a
muestran
doubt,
grandes
the
desafíos
elements that
y
have
también
been presented
recomendaciones a
do
seguir
give
que
us
surgen de la propia voz
challenges
y
and
realidad de cada
recommendations
niña y
that come
adolescente
from
en
the
la
voice
universidad
and
de la
reality
región.
of every
Pero
girl
también
in
seguramente más de
on
las
the move
200
in the
personas
region.
que en estos
And more than
momentos
those
nos están
200
escuchando y
people,
participando
more
de
than
este
200 people
proceso de
are listening to
reflexión
us right
que ha
now.
generado inquietudes, preguntas,
If
reflexiones.
this process
Entonces les
has
invitamos
created
a
any
invitarlos
questions
a
in your
poder
mind,
compartir las
we would
líneas en el
invite you
chat
to
que
share
tienen en el webinar,
questions,
de tal
thoughts,
forma de poder ser
doubts
parte de
in the
esa
chat that you
reflexión,
see in the
de ese
webinar and to
planiciendo
be
y que
part
luego
of
vamos a tener
this
un espacio
reflection.
para poder
We will
interactuar
have
con
a space
panelistas
at
y
the end
poder
to be
tener
able
un
to
feedback o una
interact with the
retroalimentación por
panelists
parte de ellos.
and to hear some
Ahora sí,
feedback from
con
you.
estos primeros aportes generados y
Now,
compartidos,
with
es momento de
these
llamar a
first
expertos
words that have been
vinculados
shared,
a la
we're
temática
going to
que
bring
realmente
some
puedan generar una
experts on the
conversación viva
topic who
sobre
can
los
really
desafíos en
create
la
a
atención y
conversation
protección
about the
a las niñas y
challenges
adolescentes en
in
movilidad
protecting
en el marco de los
girls and
resultados
young women
presentados
in the
y
situation in the
especialmente
framework
por el impacto
of
generado
the
por la pandemia
results
COVID-19.
presented by the
Sus
studies and the
ponencias
impact generated by
vamos a pasar la palabra a
COVID-19
varias
pandemic.
personas que están
So we
hoy con
want
nosotros
to
en
pass the
nuestras
floor to
pantallas.
several people who we
Y
are
como idea
honored
para
to have
ello,
with us here.
¿quién más experta
And
que
who
una
could be
niña
more of an
inmigrante?
expert
Por
than a
eso
migrant
empezamos
girl?
en esta
For this
instancia
reason,
dando
we
la
will
palabra
start at this
a
time
Marlen,
giving
quien nos
the
honró con su
floor to
simpatía,
Marlen,
una
who has
adolescente de
honored us
15
with her
años,
presence here
migrante
today.
hondureña,
A
que nos va a
young woman,
asesorar
15
en esta
years old,
instancia
a
para la
migrant from
retroalimentación de nuestro país.
Honduras, and she will
Marlen,
be
tiene
sharing
la
with
palabra.
us today. Marlen, the floor is yours.
Marlen,
Hola, muy buenos días a todos.
Hello, good morning to everyone.
Soy Marlen.
I am Marlen.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Mucho gusto de estar con todos
It's
ustedes
a
aquí.
pleasure to be here with all of you today.
Considero una niña migrante
I consider
y
myself
quiero ser la
an
vocera no
immigrant,
solo de mi
and
país,
I would like to
Honduras,
be the
sino
voice
que
not just for those from my country,
muchas niñas
Honduras,
a través del
but
mundo
of
y
many
también de las
girls
que
all around the
la
world, and
padecieron
especially
y por
those
causa de la
who may have
violencia
disappeared, and
y
because of
personas
violence,
que les causa placer una niña, quiero ser la
people
vocera
who
de todas ellas.
help girls as well. I'd like to be the voice of all of these girls.
muchas gracias, Marlen. Sin
Thank
duda,
you so much,
sos
Marlen.
una de ellas el día
Without
de
a
hoy.
doubt, you can
No sé
speak
si hay algo más que
for
quieras compartir,
girls. Is there anything else that you would like to share at this time?
¿no? Bueno,
No?
entonces primero
Okay.
muestra una
Well,
transición del
if you have
aporte
any
importante.
other reflections to
Es
share with us,
inmediatamente
feel
muy
free to
relevante
let
lo
us
que
know.
vamos a venir
Absolutely
discutiendo
very
y que
relevant
pueden hacer
for to
parte
have
de
you
este proceso
here
de reflexión.
and that you form a part
Entonces, si
of
no tienen
this
más nada que
reflection
compartirnos,
process. So if
vamos
you
a
don't
dar
have
la
anything else to
palabra
share with us
a
at the
nuestra
moment,
primera
Marlon,
persona
then we will
introductor,
pass the floor
quien
to
va
our
de su
next
experiencia y su
speaker,
perspectiva,
who
nos
is
va a
going
compartir una
to
reflexión.
share with us. Excuse me.
Marlen,
Oh, Marlon.
Quería compartir
I'm sorry, I
ahora.
did want to share a little more.
perdón, porque creo que
Oh,
había
excellent.
terminado.
I'm so sorry. I
Le doy
thought
la
you had
palabra a
finished.
Marlen. A ver si
The
escuchamos
floor
bien.
is yours,
Muchas gracias.
Marlon. It's a pleasure to hear from you.
Bueno, yo vengo a compartir mi historia sobre niña
I want to
migrante.
share my story
Creo
as
que
a
son muchos
migrant girl.
desafíos los que llevamos
I
al
think that there are a
migrar.
lot of challenges that we face
También vamos
when we
dejando
migrate,
desafíos de
and we
nuestra familia,
face
dejamos nuestra
challenges
familia,
because we
nos
leave our
exponemos en
families.
el camino
We're
porque somos
exposed
niñas y
throughout the
de tal
entire
manera
travel
podemos
because we're
ser
girls, and
abusadas
we could
sexualmente,
be sexually
también
abused
verbalmente
and verbally
y
abused.
creo que son muchos riesgos los que
I think
llevamos
that
al
there are a
migrar
lot of risks that we take
porque
on
son
when we
lugares que no
migrate
conocemos y
because we're
lugares
going to a
clandestinos
place
por
that
los
we
cuales
don't
nosotros
know
pasamos
and some
para
clandestine
llegar
places that we
a
might
un
go
cierto
through
lugar
in order to
y
get to a specific place.
bueno, pues
And
a mí me tocó
well,
salir de mi país y de mi
I
colonia
had to leave
porque en mi
my
colonia
country and my colony because
es muy
in my colony or
riesgoso
my area it's
y hay
very
un punto
dangerous.
de
And
exceso
there's an excessive
en lo
there's
que es
there's a
el
point where
abuso
it's
sexual
it's
también
excessive. There's
y
sexual
explotación de
abuse
las
as
niñas.
well, and
Ahorita en
exploitation
tiempos del
of
COVID,
girls. Right now,
ahorita
with
en la
COVID,
cuarentena, creo que
with the
está
quarantine,
afectando más a las
I
niñas
think it's
en mi
really
comunidad
affecting girls in my community
porque hay ciertos
because
puntos en
there are
donde
certain
están
points where
las personas que cobran impuesto de guerra,
people
que
who
son los que
charge
sacan de los
war
taxistas,
taxes,
empresas,
they
y ya
take
que las
those
empresas
from
empresas y
businesses
los
and things like
taxistas
that.
no
And
están disponibles ni
taxi
tienen
drivers
ingresos.
and businesses
Entonces lo que
aren't
ellos
working anymore.
hacen
So those
es
people
incitar
don't
a las
have any more
niñas
income.
a
So
que
what they
vayan a
do
favor
is
de ellos
they get the
y van a
girls to
ponerles
go with them
banderitas. Esas
and
banderitas son
they
puntos
put little
claves,
flags on
usualmente
them.
están en cada esquina.
Those
Pueden estar en una
flags are
esquina
like
arriba,
keys that they
abajo,
stand
en
in
la
a
calle,
corner. They
pueden estar
stand
ahí.
at
Son
this
las que
corner on this street
avisan
or
o
that street,
comunican
and
a
they
estas personas
communicate
que
to
están
those
cobrando
people
impuestos,
that those girls
las que
are
avisan cuando
that
viene la policía
they're
o la
charging
patrulla.
taxes, and they'll
Ellas
let
son
them
las que
know if
avisan.
there's a police officer
También quiero
coming,
recalcar
and
que no
they'll let
solo pasa eso,
them know
sino que
if they see
también
those kinds of things. But that's not the only thing that's
ellas
happening.
tienen que estar con cada uno de los hombres que están ahí.
They have to be with
Porque
all of the
tienen
men that are
explotación
there.
sexual
So it's like
y
sexual
también les echan en
exploitation,
cara, o sea, ellas
and
tienen
they
que
throw it
hacer
in their
esto
face,
porque les echan en
like they
cara
have to
que
do that
necesitan
because they throw it in
proteger
their
su casa
face
y a su
that
familia.
because
Pero
they're
bueno,
gonna
así no es,
protect their
¿verdad?
families.
Porque
But
igual
in reality,
a la
it's
hora
not even true
no, ellas
because
no las defienden.
in the end, they don't
Entonces
defend their
ellos, esa es
families.
la excusa que usan
So
para
that's
que
the
estas niñas
excuse
pasen
that they
a
use so
través de
that
ellos.
those girls
Entonces
will
creo
be
que
with
ha
them.
afectado mucho también el
And I think
embarazo,
it's affected a lot the
porque
issue
casi
of
toda mi
pregnancy
colonia,
because
las
in
niñas
almost my whole
y
neighborhood,
compañeras están embarazadas
my
y también
friends, the
hay
other
unas
girls, they're
que
almost
ya
all
tuvieron.
pregnant, and there are
Entonces
some that
creo
already
que está
had
afectando
babies.
demasiado a las niñas.
So I think
Por
it's
eso yo
really
quiero ser
affecting girls
vocera
a lot.
a
And
través
that's
de
why I
ellas,
want to
a
speak
través de mí,
for us, for
no
them.
solo de
I
ellas,
want to
sino del
speak,
mundo entero y de los que
myself,
ya no
but
están.
not just them, but the whole world
Gracias.
and all of that. Thank
Marlen,
you.
muchas gracias por tu palabra. Sin
Marlen, thank
duda
you
nos
so
has
much for sharing your
ayudado a
words.
sentir más
Without a doubt, you have
empáticos
allowed
quienes
us
viven
to
la
feel
difícil
more
situación
about
y a
what you've
cómo
lived
poder
through, the
acompañarlos. Es muy
challenges you face,
inspirador lo que
and
nos has
how we
estado
can
contando
accompany you
y
in
nos
this.
permite
Very
entonces seguir
inspiring.
pensando
And this
juntos
allows
en
us
cómo
to
poder
continue
acompañar esta
thinking
situación
about
y dar
how we
una
can
respuesta
go
que
through this
garantice los
situation,
derechos
deal with this
de cada
situation,
niña y
and create a
adolescente que
situation that
vive en nuestro
guarantees the
territorio.
rights
Muchas
of
gracias.
every girl on the move
Seguimos entonces
in the
con las
region. Thank you
reflexiones y
so
aportes.
much.
Tengo el
With
honor de
that,
dar
we
la
will
palabra
continue
a
with
Diego
some
Beltrán,
reflections. I
coordinador de la
will pass
Secretaría
the floor to
Técnica
Mr.
de
Diego
nuestro
Beltran,
CONVIN, la respuesta
Technical
para
Secretary
Venezuela,
of R4V,
enviado
the
especial
response
del director
to
general de la
Venezuela,
OIM
Special
para la
Envoy of
Defensa
the Director
Consular y la
General,
Situación
the
en Venezuela. Muy
General
bienvenido,
Director of the
Diego.
IOM
Muchas
for the
gracias.
regional response to the situation in Venezuela. Welcome, Mr.
Muchísimas
Beltran.
gracias por la presentación, Jorge.
Thank you so
Muy
much for
buenos
the
días a
introduction,
todos,
Jorge,
todas. Muy buenos
and
días,
good morning to
Victoria, Erika,
everyone. Good
Sandra, todas
morning,
las
Victory,
colegas
Erika, Sandra,
de
all of the
Save the Children
colleagues
que han
from Save the
participado en la
Children
organización
who have
de este
participated
evento y
in
a
the
todos y todas
organization
las
of this
panelistas.
event.
Es un
And to
gusto
all of the
y
panelists,
particular
it is a
honor
pleasure
y
and a
emoción
special honor, and especially
compartir con
exciting
las niñas
to
que a
share
través de
with
sus
the
propias
girls
voces nos
who, through
están
their own
relatando
voices,
sus retos,
have
sus
been able to
dificultades, sus
share their
ansiedades.
challenges,
Quisiera
their
saludar también
the
a mi
difficulties that they
colega, mi
faced.
coordinador
And I would
de
like
la
to
plataforma
highlight
por Patria Amor,
my
José Manuel, que
coordinator with
seguramente está entre la
UNHCR, Jose
audiencia, y
Manuel, who
también
is certainly
mencionar
out there
a
in the
nuestro
audience.
representante
And I would
especial,
also like to
Antonio
mention our
Castillo.
special representative,
No quisiera dejar pasar
Castaigne,
y
who is
el
out there.
gran rol y la
And
labor
I don't
importante
want
que Save
to
the Children ejecuta en función de su
or
mandato,
I want to highlight
garantizar
the
nuestra
importance of
nacional, de
Save
su
the
razón de
Children
ser
in their mandate,
y su
in their
participación
mission,
activa en la
and in their
plataforma regional
active
de
participation in the
coordinación
regional
interoficial para la
platform
respuesta a los
for the
flujos de
response
refugiados y
to
migrantes de Venezuela.
the
También su rol
Venezuelan
dentro de la
migratory
coalición de
flows,
organizaciones de la sociedad
especially their
civil
role
para
as
la
a civil
defensa de los derechos de
society
las poblaciones
for
refugiadas
defending
y
the
migrantes
rights
y
of
desplazadas en
migrants
Latinoamérica y el
and
Caribe.
displaced
Este es
persons
un
in Latin
aporte
America and the
más que
Caribbean.
importante para
There
las
is
dinámicas
input is very important to the platform and to the response, especially to the Venezuelan flows. We are very interested, very impacted by the conclusions of these studies, especially in our cases, we are focused on responding to the situation with Venezuela. It is very pertinent, and we find ourselves in a very relevant time, as we're going to talk about in just a few minutes. This study really helps us to find the keys and a better understanding of the vulnerabilities and the needs, and also the response that we can give. I have to say the conclusions are alarming. The lack of food, lack of education, inadequate health services, lack of safety, which has been emphasized absolutely, and which is a constant risk, the risk of sexual violence as well, physical violence, commercial and sexual exploitation, affecting the psychological situation, both in transit and in the destination country, lack of services and exposure to different situations like Marlen mentioned, the exchange of sex for basic needs and other severe risks to their health. And I want to add another element that has been very key and continues to be key in this very difficult response to the Venezuelan flows, which affects Venezuelans broadly and boys and girls specifically, which is a lack of documentation. A lack of documentation which impedes many times the regularization of these boys and girls, their families, and it puts them at risk of being separated from their families. This is an element that is also vitally important. Within the framework of this regional platform, which we mentioned and which is known as R4V, we work with 7 different countries in Latin America and over 140 different organizations, most of them civil society organizations, which participate in the response to the situation. This is a key space in the platform for initiatives throughout the region to protect boys, girls, and young people specifically, which is led by UNICEF in one region, and the very active and important participation of Save the Children and other organizations. There is strong synergy, certainly, with education sectors and protection sectors. I would like to say at this time that there are many different tasks that we're looking at, and we want to deal with the issue of COVID-19, as has been mentioned now. We are involved with all of these different organizations in the platform on developing a plan, a regional plan to respond to the Venezuelan migratory flows. We have a plan which is our guide. Where do we need help? Where do we need to work to develop this plan? And this situation is perfect. These studies talk about how we are here at the perfect time to provide something positive to this process. I'd also like to mention the intergovernmental aspect, which is a key dimension for all of us, because it is the authorities in the receiving countries who have the responsibility to make decisions and adopt measures that are necessary for the protection of girls, boys, and young people. In this sense, I would like to mention the Quito process, where there was a recent meeting with the president, under the president of Chile, and which seeks to create a non-binding space where we can inform about the difficulties that come out of these intergovernmental meetings and find solutions to protect boys, girls, and young people in their family reunification and in the process of a regional tool, the construction of a regional tool that will allow us to fight these problems and create protections. As we mentioned before, the responsibility that the states have and the ability to participate and promote in these spaces that are created where we need more support from civil societies is very important. We can create effective response this way, working together. There are a lot of different priorities that come up. Certainly, in COVID-19, creating support for young people, boys and girls, and migrants is very important at the time that they find and stay with their parents, that they have access to social services, that their basic needs are met, everything that can be developed in terms of offering them support, even cash-based transfers, food, health, education. All of these programs are fundamental. Awareness raising is important, being able to provide technological tools to those who need them. For example, students that need to be able to take their classes, they need to have access to education and need to be able to participate in the regular education programs. As we have mentioned before, the impact of gender-based violence on children and the need that we're seeing in this subsector of gender-based violence is significant, and there is a manual being developed to support and to fight against this in the context of COVID-19. We're just about to launch a regional platform led to help develop better equality and to fight gender inequality in migrations, and to help us to listen to the voices of boys, girls, and adolescents. And I'd like to mention a few best practices, a few positive experiences that also help us to find solutions. I think that everyone is familiar with the initiative that has happened in Colombia of providing nationality to boys and girls who are children of Venezuelans, but who were born in Colombia. Thousands of children have benefited from this in the past few years. The creation of friendly spaces for children. This was created by the group Griffin in a national platform in Colombia. And the plans to do DTM research are also very important. I want to mention in Brazil, too, the incorporation of almost 4,000 children to the school system through bilingual education, as they need Portuguese. And one of the biggest wins here is the incorporation of indigenous children. In Colombia, the Guajira; in Brazil, the Guayuraya, and other ethnicities. This is fundamental to be able to assist them, to support them, and promote technological tools, offering tablets and different online platforms for boys and girls. For example, in Ecuador, psychosocial support, which has been fundamental. And here, to wrap up a little bit, what we mentioned something at the beginning, which is the need for regularization. We have a great example in Peru, where 35,000 boys and girls are going to public schools, and the need to legalize their parents and get them documents so that they can finish their school year. I would also like to mention, in the many priorities that we have, 3 key priorities. Protection as a fundamental commitment for children and migrant children. The work for young people in the protection system in each country must match international standards, and that is exactly what this study tells us. It amplifies the voices of girls and young women who have migrated out of Venezuela. All of this to develop this primary interest of boys and girls in order to guarantee an integrated development and a dignified life for these boys, girls, and young people. Thank you once again for this initiative. Thank you so much, Diego. It was a pleasure to hear some of the concerns around this subject and to be able to hear some best practices, which really inspire us to continue working in lines that can and projects that can respond to these needs. So thank you very much for the leadership of the platform in generating a regional response plan for 2021, which will bring together the efforts of all of the different stakeholders in these communities. Thank you very much. Now I have the honor of passing the floor to Alicia Amalia Rodriguez Illescas from the SICE, the Central American Integrated System, Technical Secretary for the Women of the Council of Women's Ministers of Central America and the Dominican Republic. Welcome, Alicia. The floor is yours. Good morning. Thank you. Thank you all. Especially a warm and fraternal welcome to the migrant girls, specifically on behalf of the Council of Women's Ministers of Central America and the Dominican Republic, which is the entity responsible and with a mandate for the Summit of Presidents to look out for the human rights of women throughout their life cycle. I would like to say that the position of this organization, my organization known as COMCA, about displacement and mobility for girls or girls on the move, that is migrant girls, it is certainly related to girls and young women to do everything possible in the origin countries to strengthen protections and protection regulations, protection procedures, and all of the protections for young people so that they do not have to travel seeking better opportunities, and that the interests of girls and young women must be one of the major priorities. In this sense, the regional integration system has been working on Central American migration policy. As we all know, dealing with Zika, there was articulation in the 8 countries in the Zika region, which includes the Dominican Republic, Belize, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Costa Rica, Panama, and the Dominican Republic. And in this system of the Central American Integration Project, we work with the Presidential Summit, we work with ministers in different sectors, in health, in education, the Ministry for Women in different countries, and we define policies, sectoral policies, for advocacy to create intersectoral agreements that allow speedier processes. SICA has also been working on a plan to support migrants and assist migration. It is being reviewed with cross-cutting intersectoral interests focused on the rights of women. And in this sense, SICA is focused on the protection of human rights, especially for young people throughout Central America, including women at all phases of life. And in this sense, I would like to say that the organization COMCA is working to promote, and I'll say more about this later on, but I'd like to say, first of all, that working to promote human rights for women, that is one of our main priorities. We have the president's we have around 11 different resolutions for precedent where policies are approved, like the regional policy for gender equality and a mandate for SICA about gender equality, a mandate for presidents in SICA and for all of the different institutions in the countries. We're also included in a cross-cutting way in all of the different regional policies. That is the work being done by COMCA to advocate for a policy that is regional, that is inclusive, that has gender equality in every program, that is designed and interacts with the regional program in a way that includes the rights of women throughout their phases of life, including managing disaster management so that women can live lives that are free of violence in a culture of equality. And so, in that sense, I would like to share some of the advances that COMCA has made in this respect. Women's rights are now able to be included in the architecture of the law. There is a sectorial committee in every axis of regional policy. Axis 1 is economy for women. And this axis is led and coordinated by the leader of the economic system in the region, which is the Secretary for Central American Economic Integration. And there, all of the different institutions that have to do with the economy, like the Central American Bank, the agriculture sector for Central America, the Council for Ministries for housing throughout the region, and this is the case for every single axis. There is a Council for Women's Rights in every axis of the SICA structure. So our goal is to support in every sector equality for women, that policies are created and monitored and implemented with a focus on gender equality, so that in every axis of regional policy, the rights and interests of women are considered throughout their entire lives, in every phase of a woman's life. Considering specifically violence, at this moment, a permanent regional program has been developed, which is an agreement between the ministers of COMCA and the ministers of Central American Security, which has been developed and approved since 2018. It's a permanent regional program for prevention of violence, which has includes a series of measures that will be put in practice by the different ministries of security and ministries for women and other ministries like the Ministry of Education. In this framework, COMCA has designed for the execution of the program the plan for fighting against violence against women. And this plan works for prevention of violence starting, and this is what we're working on at this time, working with ministers of education and culture to include a class on universal human rights of women in the curriculum in primary schools in all of the educational systems in Central America in order to inform and educate and grow children in human rights and the rights of women from an early age so that they can recognize their rights and call for their rights to be respected, including all human rights that are recognized by the protection systems of the countries in the SICA region. And also all of the internal regulations for protection for girls and protection for women. Additionally, to apply this policy for equality in the region, the Permanent Project for Violence Prevention in the framework of the Spotlight Initiative and together in association with the UN system, the SICA region is applying with COMCA, supported by the European Union, a diagnosis which has been developed and will be published next week to see the degree of integration of the rights of girls and women in the SICA region. Based on that, the class will be developed, and in 2021, the class will be taught. These are some of the efforts that we have been implementing throughout the entire institution. Health policies are very important. The SICA has a Central American health policy, the Central American education policy as well. There is an agenda as well for rural women in the SICA region, which will include young women and girls in rural areas. And just to make reference to a few efforts that have been done in regional integration and in the council and ministries of women, there has been work done to advance on protection and protection policies for women and girls. So at this point, I reiterate the general interest that SICA and her institutions has in strengthening national protection systems and national development policies for children, young people, and women and adults throughout their life process. And if you have any questions or any thoughts, I am here to respond. Thank you so much, Alicia. It was very good to hear from you and very interesting to hear about the cross-cutting equality policy that you mentioned. It's very important to consider different initiatives that are going to be participating. It was an absolute pleasure. With that, we will be closing the presentation. I appreciate very much you speaking. And so now we will be passing the floor to Gloria Garcia Parra, member of the LAC-RMD Coalition for the Defense of Human Rights for Migrants, and unit coordinator for the Resilience and Humanitarian Unit at Oxfam for Latin America and the Caribbean. Gloria? Thank you so much, Jorge. Thank you all. I hope that my connection is clear. The place where I am, the connection is not perfectly clear, so I am going to cross my fingers and hopefully there won't be any problems. First of all, I would like to thank Save the Children for inviting the coalition to be able to share just a general view of what we consider that this valuable study has offered for us. We specifically want to thank people like Jaibelin, like Marlen, who have had the courage and the willingness to come before us and share their perspectives with us. how it is that boys and girls live through these very complex situations in Latin America and the Caribbean. The coalition, which Jorge mentioned, is made up of 12 different organizations that have presence in Latin America and the Caribbean. And it is tremendously difficult and challenging to give a general sweep of what we do and what we our activities. But what unifies us as an organization is an interest in collaborating with people who are in vulnerable situations and people who are going through difficult and challenging times in our region. In that sense, I would really like to focus instead on the study, the report that we're here to talk about today. And it really catches our eye. One of the things that's very interesting to highlight is that it's very interesting that an organization at a global level, like Save the Children, has its eyes focused on Central America and the Caribbean. We are very aware that many Latin American cases are not Latin America is not always the region that catches the eye of humanitarian organizations. But recently, the eyes of the humanitarian world have turned toward our region, and now with COVID-19 in Latin America, we're going to see the effects even more. In the coalition, we work, of course, in responding to the Venezuelan crisis and in all its different dimensions in the region. We also work in Central America on violence in the Northern Triangle and the migratory processes that happen there. And in some ways less, we are certainly aware of what is going on in Nicaragua and that migration, which is silent but notorious, and it is becoming more and more important from Nicaragua to other countries, specifically Costa Rica. And all of our colleagues in SAVE have mentioned the issues of girls crossing the border, and we are certainly going to find it in that border as well, without a doubt. So it's very interesting to talk about Central America and Latin America because we are the region with the highest number of inequality, the highest amount of inequality, and sometimes we have also been named as the most violent region of the world as well. And this is a huge challenge for young people, for girls, and for women. And it is not new for us to be facing this lack of protection in the borders, girls trying to cross different borders, trying to get to the United States where they feel that they'll be safer, but normally they are not. This is something that we have to pay a lot of attention to. And so we have to look at these different kinds of travel differently and people differently. It's not the same to work with adults, to work with family groups, or to work with girls and young women. We cannot think that the strategies that work with one group are going to work with another. And I believe that SAVE is very correct in guiding us to take a different route. So in the recommendations, I really want to highlight the need to support civil society organizations and the support that they offer in this situation. That is one of our key points in the coalition. We believe that civil societies are doing significant work in the region, but not just international civil societies, like many of us who work here for international civil societies, but national civil societies and the civil societies of young people. In Latin America, young people have had significant representation, and young people's movements have created the deepest changes in the region. For this reason, it is going to be very important that the work that we do as civil society organizations is focused on strengthening and giving better tools to young people's movements so that their voices are heard and their proposals are listened to and dealt with. It's not the same to talk to neighborhood groups, leaders that have been there for a long time and have a lot of experience. It's very different to listening to young people and young people's movements. So I think that we must consider how all of these measures that have been adopted for COVID-19 in terms of closing spaces and closing borders is also closing the space to work with those organizations. We are aware and we have analyzed that closing spaces and closing borders has created a significant opportunity for restriction, for cutting off young people's movements, for disactivating young people's movements. And so civil society has a very, very important role in revitalizing, supporting, and strengthening those movements so that they can continue to do the important work that they do. We understand that migration is a right and it is a strategy to save lives. It is a strategy that people use to flee from an environment where they do not feel safe or comfortable, and we understand it as a right. However, we know that this must be an informed process. We are very happy that Save the Children highlighted in the study that girls know a lot about their disprotection situation. And we need to make sure that all organizations that are working in different responses in these crises have tools and protocols and strengthening in their institutions to be able to diminish these situations of lack of protection and to give girls tools to face them. I don't want to speak too long because I know that we are over time. So once again, I just want to thank everyone here, and I want to thank Save the Children specifically for doing this study in the region. And I really look forward to seeing the complete study that you have offered. Thank you so much, Gloria, for your words from the coalition and your words about civil societies. And we really want to highlight what you said, that young people's movements must be an important voice in this process. Thank you so much for your words. As Gloria said, we don't have a lot of time left for questions. Time, of course, is always an issue, but we do have a few minutes. And looking at the questions that have arrived, one of the first ones, in fact, is directed once again to young people. We have a question for Jaibelin to see if she can tell us, as a young person, Venezuelan and Colombian, a little bit more about her experience, what it means for young people, and if she can share a little bit more about her experience as a young person. Jaibelin, I don't know, are you there? Do you feel comfortable sharing?
Hola nuevamente.
Hello, once again.
Yo les voy a hablar un poco de
I'm
cómo
going to
llegué
talk
a
a little bit
Venezuela a
about how I
Colombia.
came from Venezuela to Colombia.
Yo vine a Colombia hace 3 años.
I came to Colombia
No
3 years ago.
no era muy difícil llegar acá,
It
pero
wasn't very hard to get here,
como
but
era,
it
tenía algunos
was,
problemas, pero
I had some
cuando
problems.
veníamos
But when we were coming,
estaba todo bien hasta llegar a Maracaibo.
everything was fine until we got to
De
Maracaibo.
ahí se nos, de ahí se nos dificultó un poco
There,
llegar acá
it got
porque
difficult to get
no
here
había cómo llegar.
because there was no way to
Nos
get
montamos
here.
en una camioneta,
We got in a truck
vimos gente muy desconocida que no,
with a lot of people we didn't know,
personas que no veíamos anteriormente.
people we had never seen before.
Cuando ya llegamos acá,
When we got here,
muy, no sabíamos en dónde llegar.
we didn't know where to go.
Llegamos hasta donde mi abuela
We were
y
with my
ahí
grandmother,
nos quedamos 5 meses.
and we stayed there with my
Hasta
grandmother
hasta
5 months
llegar a Torre,
until we got to
donde estoy
Torre.
ahorita.
And that's where I am right now, Torre.
Hay muchas niñas
In
que
Torre, there are a lot of girls
están embarazadas ahorita,
that
tienen 14
are
años,
pregnant. They're 14 years old.
están embarazadas,
They're
ahorita
pregnant.
tienen un bebé,
There are some that already have a baby.
otras están trabajando
Some of them are working.
y
And
hasta un día llegó Save the Children
um,
a nuestro asentamiento.
Save the Children came here to our
Muchas
camp,
personas, obviamente no conocíamos a Save the Children,
and
pero
many people didn't know about Save the Children.
cuando lo vimos,
But when we
Muchas
saw them,
personas quedaron
a lot of people
dudosas. ¿Quiénes son esas
were
personas
like,
que acaban de
who are
llegar?
these people that just got here?
La comunidad empezó a salir
So the community started coming out.
empezó a salir haciéndose preguntas de quiénes son.
And they asked
No los
questions
conocemos,
about
primera vez que
who
los
who we
vemos.
were, but we don't know them. It was the first time we'd seen them.
Se nos presentaron, ellos nos
So
presentaron
they
quiénes
introduced
eran, por qué
themselves, who
venían.
they were, why they had come.
Y personas le empezaron a hacer preguntas.
And a lot of people started to
Empezaron a
ask
hacerles
questions. So
preguntas y
they
ellos
asked them
contestaban las
questions and they would
preguntas.
answer the questions.
Y
And
nos
they
empezaron a
they,
traer
they
beneficios,
started to bring us
muchas
some
personas
benefits.
de Save the Children.
There was a lot of staff from Save the
Ayudaron a
Children,
niñas que estaban
and they helped
embarazadas, que no
the
tenían
girls that
cómo,
were pregnant and
o
didn't have a
no tenían
way,
trabajo de cómo alimentar
or
a
they
sus hijos,
didn't have a way to
cómo
feed their
mantenerse
children. They didn't
saludables,
have work. They didn't
estando
have a way to stay
embarazadas.
healthy, and they were pregnant.
Y bueno,
And well,
muchas niñas
so a lot of girls
o sea, están muy agradecidas con Save the
were
Children
very
por la
thankful.
ayuda
We
que
were
les
very
brindaron,
thankful to Save the
porque estaban
Children for the
enfermas,
support because we've been in a lot of problems.
sufrieron de violencia sexual,
A lot of them
violencia
had been through
verbal,
sexual violence, verbal
de bullying,
violence, a lot of
porque
bullying,
somos venezolanas,
because
nosotros
we're
nos tratan mal
Venezuelans
por
and
ser
they treat us
venezolanos, por ser
badly because
venezolanos,
we're
o algunos que
Venezuelans.
somos
They'll say
de
like,
la
oh, if you're
etnia Wayuu,
Venezuelan,
que no
or a
tenemos
lot of us are
oportunidades,
Wayuu
que no
Indians,
tenemos
and they say that we don't
cuando
have the
decimos
right to
tenemos
education,
derechos, que
but we
tenemos
learned
acceso a
about our rights, that we're all the same. We all have a right to everything.
al igual como
And
la Lijuna y los Wayuu
just
tenemos
like
derechos.
us,
Personas de
the
otros países
Wayuu
también
have
tenemos
rights and
derechos,
people
todos
from
somos
other
iguales,
countries have rights.
todos
We're all the
tenemos
same.
derecho
We
a
all have a
oportunidad,
right to a
nuestros
nationality.
apellidos,
We
a
have
la
rights to
vida,
a name,
la
a
alimentación,
first name and a last name,
y
to live and to have
derecho a no ser
food, and we
discriminados.
have the right to not be
Por eso es que
discriminated
muchas
against.
personas,
So that's why a lot of
muchas personas
people
cuando vamos
a lot of
un lugar,
people, when we go to a
atienden y
place,
que somos
they don't want
Wayuu, que no
to
tenemos
serve
derecho a
us because
nada,
we're Wayuu, and they say
que
we don't
somos
have any
Wayuu,
rights
¿qué
to
hacen por
anything. They
acá?
say, you're
Ustedes no
Wayuu,
deben
what
estar
are you doing
acá,
here?
ustedes
You
como
shouldn't be here.
venezolanos no
Because
dan
we're
trabajo.
Venezuelans, they won't give us work.
Muchas madres buscan trabajo,
A lot of
no nos
mothers are looking
dejan
for
porque
work and they won't give us
somos
work
venezolanos.
because we're Venezuelan.
Niñas que ahorita están
And
reciclando,
girls that are
que
recycling,
como no encuentran trabajos,
they
reciclan,
don't find any work, so they
trabajando
do
de
recycling.
reciclaje
They work
para
doing
sostener a sus
recycling to
familias,
be
para
able
no tener cómo
to take
alimentarse.
care of their families. They don't have any way to
Por eso
eat.
estoy acá,
So that's
explicarás a ellas.
why I'm here, is to speak for them and to tell you that we're all the same. We shouldn't be discriminated against.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Jaibelin.
Thank you
Realmente
very
la
much,
paz y la
Jaibelin.
calma con que nos
Truly,
comparten su
the
vivencia
calm
no solo
and the
nos
peace with
inspiran
which
y
you
nos dan
share your
camino para
experience
seguir, nos
inspires
recuerdan
us and
y
gives
nos
us a
enseñan,
path to
como tú bien
follow.
decías,
It shows us,
todas las
as you
niñas
said,
y adolescentes mujeres,
all
no importa
girls,
la nacionalidad,
all young
tienen
people,
derechos
all young women
y
have
nosotros
rights,
debemos
no matter their
acercarnos y brindarles
nationality.
esos derechos
And we are
gracias.
responsible to
Muchas
make
gracias,
sure
Jaibelin,
that
nuevamente por tu
your
tiempo.
rights are
No estamos
fulfilled, that
poco
you have your
tiempo,
rights.
pero sí quizás le vamos
So
a
we
pedir
have
a
just a little
Alicia
bit
que
of
nos
time
ayude
left, but we
leyendo
are
nuestros
going to ask
comentarios,
Leedison, who has
preguntas
been
que han
reading
surgido
our
y algunas feedback de las
comments.
personas que nos
We've
acompañan.
seen more than
Si hay alguna
250 people
pregunta que
participating with
puedan
us here. And so if there are
suscitarse,
any
estará para alguno de
questions,
los panelistas que
we
quiera
would love to hear
responderlas.
those and share them
Ana, ¿nos
with
tienes
the panelists.
alguna pregunta?
Anne, are you there?
Jorge. En realidad,
Yes,
hemos
thank you
recibido
so much,
muchísimos
Jorge. Yes,
comentarios y
we have
preguntas.
received many comments and many
Los participantes
questions.
piensan que los hallazgos son muy
Participants are
impactantes.
very
Las evaluaciones de
impacted and
vigilancia a distancia,
interested
sobre
in these
todo ahora en el
studies and the
contexto de
findings,
COVID, y sobre
especially
todo
in the
impactante los
context of
testimonios de
COVID,
Marlen y Jaibelin.
and
Una
listening to
pregunta
Jaibelin and
sobre,
Marlen's
me gustaría
testimonies has
levantar
been very
al panel.
powerful. I would like
¿Hacia
to
qué
mention
instancia
one
estatal
question.
debería ser la incidencia para lograr
What
mayor
state
inversión?
organization
Quizás podemos
needs
iniciar con esto,
the
iniciar
highest level
primero
of
por Jaibelin.
advocacy? I think we would need a lot more time to answer this question, but it's a very good question. So is there anyone in the panel who would like to give just a few words about who are the main state stakeholders or actors that we must advocate with to create a better response? Alicia raised her hand. Yes. I would like to say that this issue of universal human rights for boys, girls, young people, and women is the responsibility of the state. And when I say the state, I mean every institution, every organization, and every power of the state. The executive, the legislative, and the judicial branches control organizations and ombudsman's offices, the electoral system, and civil societies. Understanding civil society in its complete context, not just organizations that are specifically focused on young people, girls, and women's. Also, political parties, which are political institutions. Everyone has a responsibility to look out for universal human rights, which are sacred, and they are written in our own constitutions, as well as regional and international and sub-regional agreements. I do think that the executive is important, but we must focus on working together because this problem has enormous dimensions when we look at migration and when we're talking about preventing violence to these citizens. These citizens shouldn't have to leave their countries. If these countries had goods and services for their own development, these people would not leave. So I think that that is something that falls fundamentally on state institutions, but it is a responsibility that we all share. And we must advocate with those institutions and ensure through social auditing processes that commitments, laws, regulations, public policies are properly implemented. Thank you so much, Alicia. Without a doubt, very important what you have said there. And so I think with that, we have just about run out of time. We do want to hear some words. I believe these words are very important as we're finishing up, very key with this difficult topic of girls on the move. The response that we can achieve and the really impactful work that can be done must be done with the commitment of all state actors in order to find solutions, and also by working together with different government actors, civil society organizations, the UN agencies, and without a doubt, working with young people, girls, and young women to hear their voices. If we work together, then we will have a real impact in the lives of each girl on the move. So to close, I'm going to pass the floor to Liderson, the director of the program for support for civil protection from the regional office for Save the Children in Latin America, to give us a close. This is a very interesting initiative that has been shared by this program. Go ahead. Thank you so much, Jorge. It is really a joy to be able to share with you today an initiative from the Civil Society Support Organization, PASC or Peace. In the third year, in a year, we have worked with Zoom Your Rights, and this competition has the goal that young people are able to express their concerns through art and technology. Last year, the phrase that we used was raise your voices, raise your voice for migrant children. We collected many different participations, and in order to launch the study, Girls on the Move, we would like to share with you today the winning video, first place video These are young people from Buenaventura, Colombia, and the song is called Searching for Opportunity. I would like to share with you what they said during the prize event or the award event. They said, through our song, we want to develop deep considerations about the rights of migrant children. Borders should not be above human rights. We hope that people will see that girls and boys aren't culpable for being in this situation and that they have rights as well. So we're going to hear that song now.
No tengo para comer, luchamos para dormir. Muchos me rechazan por no ser de aquí. No hay nadie que nos ayude y nos dé su mano. También tengo derecho como todo ser humano. Somos niños de otro país, llegamos por necesidad, buscando una luz, buscando oportunidad. Somos niños de otro país, llegamos por necesidad, buscando una luz, buscando oportunidad.
Bueno, sin duda, la reflexión
Without a
creada,
doubt,
los testimonios
the reflection
de
generated
estos
today
nos han dado
has
un nivel
given
de
us
claridad
a
de lo que
level
está
of
ocurriendo
clarity
y
about what is
esperamos que
happening,
esto nos
and we
permita
hope that
renovar
this will allow
nuevas
us to
la
renew
energía
our
para ir
efforts,
celebrando
our
los
energy,
derechos
to
de
continue
las familias,
ensuring
la movilidad,
that the rights
la
of girls on the move are a reality in our region. We hope that this joint reflection allows us to continue working together and walking together. Thank you for being with us here today. We hope to stay in touch on and continue discussing important topics about boys and girls. Thank you so much. Especially thank you to Marlen and Jaibelin. Thank you. We're out.